My name is Josephine Conti. I am the court reporter today. I'm just going to ask counsel to again identify themselves for the record, please.
So for the record and on behalf of plaintiffs, my name is Brian DeBush, D-E-B-A-U-C-H-E 28593, and Mr. Antolon is present as principal of the plaintiff.
Thank you.
On behalf of the defendants, David Ayroud, A-Y-R-A-U-D, number 28530.
Thank you. And Ms. McDonough, will you please state your full name for the record?
Angela McDonough.
Thank you. And will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, we can begin.
Ms. McDonough, I have some questions for you, but first I have to find out if you understand the rules in a deposition, and I always ask if you've been deposed before. Have you ever been deposed before?
No.
So deposition works just like testimony in a court in some respects. There's no, obviously, judge present, there's no courtroom, but all of the testimony is sworn, as you just saw. And so we have to follow certain rules regarding sworn testimony. You understand you're sworn to tell the truth?
Yes.
And in terms of depositions, I ask that your answers be truthful, accurate, and complete. Truthful, honestly, obviously means that you're sworn to tell the truth when you answer questions.
Okay.
And then in terms of complete, I ask that your answers be as complete as possible. And that means if you realize later that your answer was mistaken, or you can amend it because you looked at something that you had back at the office, or you read through some note somewhere and realize that the answer needs to be supplemented, that you provide that information to us, even if it's at a later date. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
And then in terms of accuracy, same thing. If something would refresh your recollection, I ask that you sort of indicate what that would be so we can get it to you if possible. But that your answers at the time you give them be accurate and not guesses or speculations, or I think this might be the case, because those aren't as helpful as clear answers about things that you are sure of, especially in a case like this. Is that acceptable to you as well?
Yes.
In terms of outside information you may need, did you bring any information with you today, notes and outline or anything else that you're referring to while you testify?
No.
And if there were such things that you needed to take a look at before you were done testifying today, could you let us know what those things might be?
Sure.
Have you ever testified before?
No.
So testimony sort of works in this back and forth manner, just like you see on TV. I ask a question and then you give an answer, and maybe Mr. Ayroud objects at times, but unlike on TV, in a deposition, you usually still provide an answer even in the presence of an objection, unless he instructs you not to answer something, which in this case is unlikely. So you understand this is testimony that works almost the same as court, except for the way objections work.
Yes.
And in terms of the back and forth that we're doing now, we're doing this in sequence so that the court reporter can take down every word that I ask and then every word that you say.
Okay.
And that means that sort of nonverbal responses, which is the way people usually talk to each other, won't really work in a testimonial setting. So you have to say yes or no at the very least, because the court reporter can't pick up sort of the uh-huhs as an affirmative or a negative. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So, the good thing about depositions is we're somewhat relaxed about how we go through this, but we still follow certain rules. At times, I'm going to put exhibits up on the screen for you to see, and I need to know that you're able to see either a decent sized screen or at least clearly view a screen that isn't like a 1.5 inch wide cell phone screen. Do you have the capability to see something pretty large?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So in terms of your preparation for your testimony this morning, can you tell me what you've reviewed already?
Just the exhibits that have been submitted, such as the emails that went back and forth, some of the statutes that were involved.
Okay. And are there any other notes or other personal documentation you've used to keep track of items, issues, or ideas during the pendency of this case?
No.
One of the questions that came up during the prior deposition was whether or not your unit keeps phone logs of phone contact with applicants or callers or educational providers for CHP applicants.
No, we don't.
Okay. But it's clear you've reviewed your prior emails and you know that those are identified as exhibits in this case?
That's correct, yeah.
Of the exhibits that you've reviewed, are there any exhibits that we're missing? Sorry, are there any emails that we are missing from the sequence of emails that we have in the exhibits?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, very good. Okay, ma'am. You obviously said your name is Angie McDonough. Where do you currently work?
Larimer County Sheriff.
And are you the head of the concealed handgun permit unit in the Larimer County Sheriff's Office?
My title is specialist, yes.
Does that make you the head of the unit, or is someone else supervising you?
I am in charge of the unit. However, I do have a supervisor who's a sergeant.
And who is that sergeant, if I can ask?
Matthew Cherry.
Do you have any particular training for your job as specialist in the concealed handgun permit unit?
No,
Are you aware of the policies that govern the operation of that unit issued by the Larimer County Sheriff's Office?
I am aware of them, yes.
And I'll show you that in just a minute. What is your level of education, if I can ask?
Some college.
Did you receive either a 2-year or 4-year degree?
No,
And you obviously then you graduated from high school?
yes,
Any other secondary training, law enforcement training, criminal justice training of any kind?
no, sir.
And how long have you been the specialist in the CHP unit at Lemmer County Sheriff's?
Specialist, about 7 years. Before that, I was coordinator, just change of title, but same position.
Okay.
So a total of 18 years.
Hopefully it came with a raise, right?
A little bit.
Good. So 18 years in the unit, but where before you were called coordinator, now you're called specialist.
Yes,
And so for the prior 11 years that you were a coordinator, were you doing almost exactly the same job?
yes.
Do you have people that you supervise or that work for you in your unit?
I do not supervise. However, I do have a part-time helper, but I am not in charge of them.
Is that your supervisor, Mr. Sergeant Cherry, that's in charge of them?
Yes,
And so the unit then is about a position and a half with one supervising sergeant.
correct.
Okay, got it. Is it safe to assume, since you're employed by the sheriff's office, you have no criminal convictions for any felony matters and no civil lawsuits filed against you for any moral turpitude allegation like theft, fraud, or criminal impersonation?
Correct.
Have you ever participated in a lawsuit either by filing or by being filed against in a civil case?
No,
Okay. Any prior regulatory enforcement that would involve professional licensing, your driver's license, taxes, anything else that involved an administrative proceeding against you?
no.
How'd you come to work for the sheriff's office 18 years ago?
I applied for a job there.
And did you immediately start in the concealed handgun permit unit?
No, actually, I started in the fugitive unit for about 6 months, and then I transitioned over to part-time concealed handgun, part-time fugitive unit.
And when did that become full-time finally?
I think after my 1-year anniversary.
Are you mentally able to recall with no impact on your ability to recall by any drugs or medication today?
Yes,
Okay, I'm going to start with the exhibits. We'll go to Exhibit A first. And I don't know how big you need this to be blown up on the screen. Can you see that pretty clearly?
Yes.
So I'll go back to, go down to the bottom of the email, but this is an email from Sheriff Smith to you, April 20th of 2020, it looks like.
One second, I gotta scroll.
Right up here.
And if I can, I apologize. You can't scroll up and down. You'll need to ask him
Oh,
to
Yeah,
scroll it.
unfortunately, I control the vertical and the horizontal on this. Do you want me to scroll? Because it doesn't go up any higher, unfortunately. It ends at the April 20th email, which I think is between the sheriff and you.
I'm currently looking at April 17th.
Oh, okay. So you're down a little bit. If you can take a look right above that at the very, maybe I'm not scrolling through this right. Can you see the top where it says from Sheriff Smith?
Sheriff Smith, April 20th, yes.
There we go. Okay. So this seems to be Sheriff Smith to you saying, in case you weren't aware of this.
Yes,
And it refers to a communication from a Boulder sheriff April 17th named Pella.
yes,
Do you remember this email?
I do.
And so this, I think, came from Pella to Nichols to Sheriff Smith, who then sent it to you. Is that roughly the chain?
That's what it looks like, yes.
And it said that there was, number one, it said that there was an email to Colorado Department of Public Safety and a James Spoden about online CHP courses.
I see that, yes.
And the guidance in the email was that the entire course could not be conducted completely by internet. That's the redlined sort of section right there, if you see that.
Objective for.
Mr. Spoden is stating whether they believe the entire course is conducted via the internet or if they're picking up their certificate counts as in-person training.
Okay. What's your understanding of, at that time at least, what Colorado handgun permit classes could include, either online or in person?
It's my understanding that it has to be one or the other. I wasn't aware at that time that it could be partial.
Okay. As part of this series of emails with Sheriff Smith, did you take any action, phone calls or other communication with either Guns for Everyone or the identified provider in this email?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as A1. This is now an email April 22nd by you to several other people, and I'll just ask after you read through it if you recognize the email.
Yes.
So this is 5 days later, and it sends an email out to
Those are our front desk deputies.
5 other people, and they're all deputies at the front desk. Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
And so this is your announcement that the class is online, so you will not be accepting certificates?
That is going by what Boulder County told us.
Okay. And if I sort of scroll down, the rest of this seems to be that same chain of emails with Pella, with Mr. Spoden, and then with your own Sheriff Smith.
Correct.
What was your understanding on April 22nd, 2020 as to why your county would not be accepting the certificates from Guns for Everyone?
Based on information from Boulder County that their classes were completely online, so we will not be accepting.
Did you have any other information other than the email from, I guess, Sheriff Pella in Boulder County?
No.
Did you, okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as A2. So A2, I think, is a discussion between you and Sheriff Smith going back and forth about replying on May 7th, 2020 to an email from Mr. Antolon. Do you remember that email from Mr. Antolon?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay. And there's a discussion between you and Sheriff Smith about the certificates, the classes, and picking up the certificates. And this is early May between you and Sheriff Smith. By that point, had anyone from Larimer County Sheriff's Office confirmed that the classes being provided by Guns for Everyone had no in-person component?
By that email, it says that we questioned some of the applicants coming in our door.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they took some of it online and some of it was in person.
Okay. And then your statement in that same email at 2:55 p.m. says they have to take the whole class in person.
That was my understanding at that time.
Okay. On what was that understanding based, if you can tell me?
State law says that you cannot take, at least I thought, I hadn't seen the state law at that point, that you cannot take a class online.
And so by May 7th of 2020, you had never read the state law at 1812 Part 2?
Not personally, no. I just knew that there was a state law stating no online classes.
Did you know that that law had changed after the legislative session in 2013 to include online classes?
Completely online, or are you talking about partially online?
At all? Did you know that it had changed in 2013?
No.
Okay. I'm going to skip forward to a May 11th email between you and the sheriff, and that is still marked as Exhibit B. So it's from the county's own production of emails, and I'll blow it up again so you can see it. But this is the email that led to the one we just looked at in A2. It's a May 7th, 2020 email by Mr. Antolon from Guns for Everyone. You can see in the email address, it's edgar@gunsforeveryone.com. But what it says is that he had just heard from a student that the certificates from that provider were being rejected because they're doing a portion online. And at that time, that was accurate. You were rejecting those certificates because they had an online portion of the class.
What was the question? Sorry.
I said, my question was, in terms of line 1 of that email on May 7th at 11:14 for Mr. Antolon, he said a student was rejected because a portion of the class was online. And that's accurate that you were rejecting those certificates.
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Antolon pointed out that the handgun training class could not teach the entire course online, and he included the law right there in the email, 1812-202.
Check the form.
Okay, I see that part.
Okay. Was that the first time you had read that law?
Yes. And I did not read the entire law. I just read this email.
And when you read through that portion of the law, did you seek any advice from your supervisor, Sergeant Cherry, or anyone else about that law?
Sheriff Smith.
And was that the email that we see directly above this one on May 7th of 2020 also?
Yes, I asked the sheriff if he wanted to apply directly to Mr. Antolon.
Okay. And you wrote a reply later on that afternoon and indicated to Mr. Antolon that there was a response from the sheriff. Is that the section that I've highlighted here, May 7th at 16:59?
I'm reading it right now. Hold on.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Okay, so that at that point, the sheriff directed me to get information from the student to clarify how much training they had online and how much training they had in person, because Boulder County raised a concern that the in-person portion was only picking up their certificate. So the sheriff wanted a statement from the student stating that they took online training and also had training in the classroom setting.
And
if
one,
that-
go ahead.
excuse me.
Go ahead.
So if the student provided information that they took both online and in-person training,
Mhm.
then we would accept their certificates.
And that sort of contrasts with what you actually said in the email, which if you read the second sentence in your email, it says, as you know, Colorado does not accept online courses because we cannot verify who sat at the computer. Is that what you believed the Colorado law to be at that point?
That was the sheriff's directive prior to this whole guns for everyone situation.
Okay.
In the past, online classes were completely online. And the state had decided not to accept those because we couldn't verify who sat in front of the computer. This is the first company that we've come across that has partially online and partially in person. So we were kind of deciding what to do at this point, and it was decided on this May 7th email that if the student provided a statement that they actually took part of the class in person, that we would accept the certificate.
And that was the sheriff's instruction to you?
That is the sheriff. Yes, that's correct.
And that's similar to what Colorado Department of Public Safety had indicated in the previous email in April?
I'd have to see that again, but
Okay, that would be Exhibit A. I can put that back up.
I believe the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Mr. Spoden, said that we'd have to verify that they took online and in person.
Okay, I believe that's correct. And so in terms of that representation by Mr. Spoden at Colorado Bureau of Investigation, in terms of the section of the statute that Mr. Antolon provided to you, and then in terms of what Sheriff Smith provided here, it seems that that statement is incorrect, that Colorado does in fact accept online courses, regardless of who sits at the computer, I guess, but that statement is not entirely right.
Object form.
At the time of this email, we were finding about the differences in the statute, whether online or partially online.
Okay, so the first time you had to deal with remote learning, at least in part of the class, was through Guns for Everyone and the issue that came up in April and May of 2020.
Correct.
Got it. All right, on May 7th, 2020, then Mr. Antolon sent a response back to you, and this was only 20 minutes later, 22 minutes later. And he indicated there was a different section of the statute, 1812-2013, that prohibited additional paperwork like what the sheriff described as a new notarized affidavit about the class they took. You read through that email?
I did, and I referred this to the sheriff directly because that's above my purview.
Right, okay. And so when you referred that to the sheriff, first, I think what you did on May 11th was you had an earlier response to Mr. Antolon that said you still wanted the students to verify attending an in-person class in addition to the online training, and it has to be in writing. That was your first response.
Not me personally wanting the sheriff. I was speaking for the sheriff.
Okay, got it. And then right above that is Mr. Antolon's response on May 11th again, 12/14. And he said that they have never conducted the entire class online.
We did have one student come in that we questioned, and that student said that the in-person portion was only to pick up a certificate. So that caused concern for us.
Do you know who that student was or who made that statement?
No, it was to a front desk deputy, and I was not present.
Okay. And Mr. Antolon provided pictures of students in the class and said he could submit videos and more pictures if it was needed.
I don't recall that.
It's right here in the that second sentence in the email on May 11th.
Okay, and at that point is when I forwarded all of that to the sheriff.
And he also said that the company never operated by having students simply pick up a certificate. That was his fourth sentence in that same email.
Okay,
You remember reading that?
barely, but yeah.
Okay. And then what you forwarded to the sheriff was on May 11th at 12:16, a single question. Do we want to keep going back and forth with this guy?
Correct.
Was that your referral to the sheriff for an opinion about the two statutes he had cited, the information he had offered at that point?
At that point, it seemed that Mr. Antolon was argumentative, and I didn't have any further information for him, so I wanted the sheriff to handle this directly.
Okay, but what it actually asks is whether you can just stop responding to him. That's what that question clearly implies.
Whether I need to keep responding to him, I pass this on to the sheriff.
And on May 11th, the sheriff responded to you and said, we don't need to debate it with him. So that seems to have
Correct.
cut off that debate.
That was his decision, yes.
So prior to this chain of emails, May 11th, had you ever reached out to Guns for Everyone or Mr. Antolon about the educational course that he offered or any of the certificates that they used?
No, sir.
After May 11th of 2020, did you ever reach out for that same information to Mr. Antolon or Guns for Everyone?
He reached out to me, so I didn't reach out to him.
Okay. So by that point where the courses, according to him, are presented online and in person, and you've asked for additional documentation that he believed to violate a separate statute, 1812-201. Was the issue resolved in your mind that the certificates would not be accepted without additional documentation?
In my mind, I was waiting for the sheriff to change his mind, whether we were going to accept the certificates or not. And at that point, the sheriff decided to do more investigation, and I was not involved in that investigation.
So did your unit continue to reject or refuse the certificates from May 11th, which is when that last email chain occurred, until at least June of 2020?
Yes, I was waiting for the sheriff to give me further directive.
Do you know when you began to accept the certificates again?
I believe after the sheriff was in contact with the county attorney and yourself, and there were some stipulations that Mr. Antolon would have to follow with issuing certificates. And if Mr. Antolon agreed to those stipulations, we would again start accepting those certificates, which we did, I believe, starting June 30th or somewhere around there.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as Exhibit 5. Exhibit 5, I think, are emails between yourself and your counterpart at the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And it's again a discussion about the same educational provider and certificates.
Yes.
And I'll go down to the bottom so we can sort of follow it chronologically. It begins with her contact to you on May 21st, saying that they had someone attend one of the courses last night, which I guess would be May 20th of 2020. And they were out the door with a signed certificate within 30 minutes. And they were recommending refusing their certificates, much like you were doing. That seemed to be her first contact with you about this issue. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Did they provide anything further on that issue, either the memo that she provided or the investigative results that they reference in the email?
No.
Did Boulder County ever provide anything on what they said was their investigation of Guns for Everyone?
No, not to me anyway.
So on May 21st, you get this email, and your response, I think, is directly above same day. And I think you try and clarify here what was going on. But is this your email on County Document 52 and 53 where you say you are not refusing to accept the certificates?
Correct. As long as they sign an affidavit saying how much time they spent online and how much time was spent in the classroom, we would accept their certificates.
Okay. Did you ever create a form to be used as an affidavit for students that were seeking to use those certificates?
I actually don't remember, sorry.
That's okay. If you go back to your office and you discover either a form or a draft on your computer, would you be able to notify us about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And at the time, then you were refusing to accept. Sorry, you would not accept the certificates without the separate affidavit about the proportion of time spent in class online and in class in person.
Correct, because we had to assume that they were just going in to pick up their certificates,
Okay. And why were you assuming that by May 21st of 2020?
because we had a student come into our office and tell us that specifically.
Okay. And that's the student that talked to the desk sergeant that we don't have either a name or a report on?
Desk deputy, yes.
Um, and so the reason I'm asking about that form is on June 12th, Miss Everett responds to you and asked if you could share the form that you created if you had one. But I didn't see you ever respond with an attachment or anything about a form that you created.
Then I'm assuming based on that, because there would be a record if I had emailed her a form, that we did not create a form.
Okay. And by June 12th of 2020, had you done anything additional to either address or communicate with Guns for Everyone or Edgar Antolon?
No, I had put the ball in the sheriff's court and I was just processing applications.
Okay. All right. I'm going to show you Exhibit 6. Exhibit 6 now is 12 days later. It's June 24th, 2020. And this, I think, comes out of an original communication from, I'm not sure who it's from originally. It looks like it's from someone named Nick Smith, who was reading through the state law and wondering if part of the class could be taken online. And that was his email on June 24th. And your response, I think, is directly above at the top.
Okay.
And here you indicate that Sheriff Smith conducted an investigation and determined the in-person portion of the class was inadequate and therefore refuses to accept the certificates issued during the pandemic. Did you believe that was an official, that was a statement of the official position of the Larimer County Sheriff's Office at the time?
Yes, I wouldn't have put his name on there if it wasn't official.
Okay. And what about the in-person portion of the class was inadequate at that time, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, the investigation was that the investigator that took the class got a certificate, a blank certificate. He wrote in his own name and never showed his ID.
Okay. So just looking at Exhibit 6, what about the in-person portion of the class was inadequate?
There was no training and there was no ID check to verify the name of the student is the same one who took the training.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this response doesn't seem to indicate anything about ID.
I did not elaborate on what the what was inadequate.
Okay, now I got it. And in terms of the in-person portion, you did not believe that what the deputy alleged was a 15-minute class. You didn't believe that portion was adequate?
The sheriff did not believe.
Okay. And did he express that to you in a writing, or was it expressed verbally to you?
I believe it's verbally if there's no written documentation.
Okay. And from the things that we've gone through so far, can you think of anything that you received from the sheriff that we don't currently have?
No.
Okay.
I believe you have everything.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as 15, and this appears to be the Larimer County Sheriff's Office Policy Manual for your unit.
Okay.
Do you believe that to be accurate?
I believe it is. I have not seen it for quite a while.
Do you know when the last time was that you saw it?
The last time it was updated, is there a date on there? It's
There's a date on an order at the end, but it's April 7th of 2020. So that would be after some of these things had happened.
No. So before that, I think it was like maybe 7 years ago. It's the last time I looked at it.
So 2014 probably.
Yeah.
Do you know if it had been updated at all from 2014 until April 7th of 2020 when we see this special order attached to it?
Not to my knowledge. I don't keep track of the policy.
Okay. And why don't you keep track of that policy?
Because I'm not the one that makes changes to it.
Okay. Do you know if it's come up for review in the last 7 years for any reason, or been considered for a policy change, for example?
I'm not aware of that. We do have to sign off on policy changes, and I do not recall seeing a policy change on that.
Okay, so this policy that I've got in Exhibit 15 has probably been the same since 2014 or so.
Or so, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Ma'am, are you the person in charge of providing at least explanations of due process to applicants for concealed handgun permits, for example?
What's your definition of due process?
So do you have to explain to them the right to a second review by the sheriff or the right to file for judicial review?
No, but we do refer to that statute.
Okay. And are you the one person in the Larimer County Sheriff's Office who handles really everything to do with the concealed handgun permits?
Just the basics of handling the applications and issuing permits. As far as legal technicalities, that's above, that would be my sergeant or the sheriff.
So it would be Sergeant Matt Sherry or Sheriff Justin Smith that would handle the legal questions about the program and the applicants?
Yes.
And in terms of the communications that you sent out, they were all authorized by the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, either your supervisor or the sheriff?
Say that again.
In terms of the communications that we've gone through that you sent out to Mr. Antolon or the other departments, your statements were the official positions of the Larimer County Sheriff's Office?
My statements were what I believed to be true at that time, yes.
Okay. Is there a possibility you were mistaken about your understanding of the law concerning concealed handgun permits?
In the early stages of this issue between Guns for Everyone and the Sheriff Smith.
Okay. How has your understanding changed over time?
That the law allows for partial online as well as the partial in-person class, as long as there's training going on the in-person side of it.
Okay. And at what point, scratch that, do you know what agreement the county reached with Guns for Everyone to remedy any shortcomings in their classes or certificates?
From my memory, it would be that the names cannot be handwritten on the certificates, that the certificates have to be personally signed by the instructor and not photocopied. And that an ID has to be checked when the person comes to the in-person training.
Okay. And so nothing about the class at all? Nothing about the remote class, nothing about the duration of the class, nothing about the training provided in the class.
Correct.
None of that's an issue anymore, right?
Correct.
And so you accept those certificates from Guns for Everyone now, as long as they comply with the certificate requirement?
Yes, as directed by Sheriff Smith.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions for her. Thank you.
I'm going to try to do this again by muting in between so that we don't speak over each other on the microphone. Let me start by asking you to refer back to the email you identified as Exhibit A from Sheriff Pelly. Do you recall that email?
Yes.
Did you have any reason to not believe the email from Sheriff Pelly that Guns for Everyone's course was entirely online?
No, I don't. I believe if they sent out an email that they believed that was true.
When you were asked about Exhibit 5, which was the email exchange between yourself and El Paso County, do you recall that email?
can refer to.
Can do you prefer if I pull up my version, or would you like to put yours up?
I can just put it back up.
Okay,
Do you recall that email?
yes.
And you made a statement about a student saying that they only picked up their certificate and there was no in-person. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that information consistent with what you received from Sheriff Pelly?
No, Sheriff Pelly just said that they were conducting online classes only.
I think you've clarified this, but I just want to make sure it's your understanding and your practice to accept certificates from courses that are partially online and partially in person currently, correct?
Correct. If they follow guidelines that the name is not handwritten, the signature is fresh and not photocopied, and that we know the guns and everyone is following the course of checking IDs.
And is it your intent to continue to accept certificates from courses that are partially online and partially in person, assuming they're compliant with either aspects?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
I'm
Okay.
muted. Are we ready to go off the record?
Yeah, we can go off the record. That's it.